Good evening and welcome to the Journey Home program. My name is Marcus Grodi, your host for this program, and this is a special edition of the Journey Home. We're here in Stockholm, Sweden, in the parish offices of the Cathedral of St. Eric here in Stockholm, filming the conversion stories of men and women who, because of their great love for Jesus Christ, also came home to the church. It's not always in that order, because each guest has a unique story as they were led by the Holy Spirit. And my guest for this program is Talat Storkirk. Is that right, Talat?
That's right.
Well, welcome to the Journey Home.
Thank you.
It's great to meet you here in Stockholm.
Thank you.
And you have a different journey. We're here in Sweden, but you weren't brought up here in Sweden. You have a whole different story.
No, I was born in pre-partition India, which is now Pakistan. And I've been...
Now, when you said pre-partition India, or Pakistan, let the audience understand about that.
That was when India was still a colony of the British. It was partitioned in 1947, and my parents then opted to become citizens of Pakistan.
Okay.
And at the time, I was going to school in Darjeeling at a convent school. And
now that I was going to say right off the bat, that seems like an irony that you're in Islam, right? Islam.
That's right. My parents are Muslims. My family are all Muslims. They still are. I'm the only Catholic in the family, and my parents sent me to a convent school because they thought that the nuns, my father especially, he thought that the nuns were the best Muslims. He said they dressed modestly, they had the right moral values, and he thought he could entrust his daughter to them. So I don't know any other form of schooling. I've only been to convent schools.
Would your other option have been Muslim schools or state-run schools? Was that why your father saw that?
I probably would not have had a schooling had there not been this form of schooling, because my father was always stationed in rather remote areas. He was working for the railways, but in the Assam, Bengal side, in the eastern India that is now, or in Bangladesh. And there were not always schools in these places. So they had to either send me to my grandparents but even my mother, she went to a convent school. So I think all girls of that generation and my generation, we would not have received an education.
If it hadn't been.
If it hadn't. We would have, of course, probably learned to read and write Urdu and so on, but it would have been a very conservative, very...
So your father felt that your mother had gone to convent school and hadn't hurt her in terms of her Islamic faith.
That's right.
So he thought it was safe for you.
Yes.
But it also basically says, and is this true, or maybe is this a caricature, that your father, when he thought of his Muslim faith, he was very emphasized on the morality of it, not so much of the theology of it?
Perhaps, but I think my parents are very religious.
Okay.
And they're very prayerful. I remember my father praying half the night, early morning. He was always praying, so my mother too. But I'm not quite sure if I could compare it to the way Catholics pray, that there's more contemplation. I think it was more just saying certain, I may be wrong about it, but this is my perception from that time, that it was more, it was not quite so deep. Gosh, I hope my father will forgive me for saying this, because I cannot judge it, but just from how I saw it, that of course, most of the prayers were said in Arabic, which we did not speak. So even I learned them by heart, and then it's a very ritualized prayer. You form certain gestures, you kneel, and you bow down and prostrate yourself, and so on. So it's
really interesting. You're doing rituals and reciting words that you may not truly understand, that's really the practice of
That's right. And then also when I was young, I was taught to read the Quran, and of course it had to be read in Arabic, and we had to really use the alphabet to kind of A, B, C, to pronounce words, because we couldn't read the Arabic, we didn't understand it. There is a commentary in Urdu underneath, so you could read it, but the real significance of reading the Quran is thought to come only from reading it in Arabic. So which was another difficulty,
Yes.
at least for me. I mean,
So you really could be actually a practicing Muslim, but not know your faith very well.
you could. You could. And I think that is, and of course people pick up, like we Catholics do, you know, you pick up certain cultural ways of being a Muslim or being a Catholic, and without really understanding. I mean, it can happen also to us Catholics too. But definitely I found it was more so in Islam that people, at least when I was younger, that's how
Was that true for you?
It was definitely true for me. I was always searching. I didn't know what I was searching for. I mean, when I first became conscious of God and my spiritual life, it was in the 50s. The Cold War was going around us. There were atom bombs being exploded in the atmosphere. And there was I remember a kind of a fear around me of what would happen. And there was a fear of the communists, there was Stalin was still alive and so on. So I became very interested in religion because I felt really maybe the end of the world was coming and I wanted to go to heaven. So that's what really spurred me on. And
were the sisters in the school, were they were they catechizing you?
No, they were not, because it was a Muslim country now when I was in Pakistan, at this time of my life.
Yeah.
So we used to receive something, we non-Catholic children, girls in that school, we used to receive something called moral armament. I think it was called that. Mm-hmm. I don't really fully recall it, but it was something that we just received, basically how to live a good life.
A good moral life to fight the battle.
That's
moral
right.
Armament.
Or something like that. It was,
right. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. So that's what we would get. But of course, I was very interested in the Catholic side, and I remember when people would say, "What are you, a Catholic?" I would say, "No, I'm a Protestant." When I was younger, because I thought, "Well, I'm not a Catholic because I can't, I don't go to catechism, so I must be a Protestant." I wasn't quite sure. That was when I was younger. But then when I grew older and I was in my teens, early teens, I realized, because in the meantime I'd received Islamic education too. A mullah used to come home and go through the...
Did your parents teach you that, the Muslim?
We had a mullah, a learned...
A little tutor.
Yes. Who was an Islamic tutor, who'd come home and we went through the Quran together, and we went through the life of Muhammad and so on. But I found that at that time when I asked questions, it was rather bad pedagogy too, because if you asked a question that he thought was inappropriate, he'd say, "Oh, he wouldn't kind of shame you that you can't question that. This is the word of God, So that kind of was. So we didn't get help in that way either. So, but anyway, I think the Spirit was leading me someplace else already then.
This was your Pakistan period.
This is my Pakistan period. Then in 1955, my father was transferred to Sudan. And he was stationed in a small town there. Again, there were no schools, so I was again sent to a Catholic convent run by the Verona sisters. And here I was older, more interested in the faith. Plus, I was asked to take up the Synoptic Gospels as a subject for school, with my father's permission, because it was just an extra subject for my GCE O levels, as they were called. This was an English exam.
For the audience, the Synoptic Gospel would be Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. And so I just took this as a school subject, and that was for the first time I really immersed myself in the Gospels. Before it was kind of hearsay, I had the Muslim view of about Jesus' life and of Our Lady and so on.
So that was your first touch of the scriptures, in depth in the scriptures.
Yes,
all right.
yes. And it really shocked me, because I being a teenager, I was extremely affected by Jesus' words of, you whitened sepulchre, you hypocrites. I somehow saw all this all around me. And it really did. It penetrated deep down. It made me feel that, oh my gosh, this is how everybody I see around me. Maybe again, it's my perception. I don't want to sort of condemn my people around me for that, but that's how I thought that we were. Hypocrites and whitened sepulchres, as Jesus said.
A bit strong there.
Yeah, I know, but as a teenager, that's what came across. So I started to I felt very uncomfortable, and I realized that there was a kind of a turmoil in my being, that I was being drawn towards Catholicism. At the same time, I felt loyalty towards Islam. It was a difficult time for me at that time, and I was a teenager. I didn't know who to approach, what to do. And
did your parents know that you were going through this?
No, because I was in a boarding school, and I didn't think I could speak about this to anybody. So it was within me, and nobody tried to evangelize me or convert me. No, nobody did. It was all for me. And of course, then I used to go sometimes to the cathedral for the liturgies, and I was absolutely fascinated by this. It used to be the the Latin mass, as it used to be. And
now, I'm assuming that then what you experienced in the liturgy was radically different than what you experienced
absolutely,
at the mosque.
Absolutely. I mean, there was music, there was incense, there was candles, there was singing. I mean, it was just something totally different. Plus, I could well, it was in Latin, but there were missals with this English text on the other side. It was just absolutely like, you hear about when the people from Russia wanted to see the liturgies, had seen the angels. It felt like that. Heaven had come down for me there. But I did resist inside me, because I really did not. I went through a short anti-Catholic phase at that time of my life, because I think that was my way of trying to put it off. And then in the meantime, I was sent to England to continue my schooling, and I came to Worthing, to another convent, this time run by the Sisters of Sion. And I was again older. I had more books around for me to look at.
And there you encounter Anglicanism.
Yes, but not really in my school, because we were in a Catholic environment there. So I was never really interested. I was never, because for me it started with Henry VIII, and so it never really.
You knew some of the history there. So
yeah, so I thought, no, I don't want to. He wasn't one of my favorite kings either, so it really didn't. It didn't attract me in that way. But it was then around when I was about 17 or so that I really, within me began to say that I wanted to be a Catholic. But it took another 6 months or so before I voiced it. I struggled with it myself.
Was there anything unique happening there in that period of training that made it more depth for you?
No, nothing. And I cannot explain it, because it was there, and it was something that I couldn't. It was like a tsunami almost within me. I couldn't keep it away.
So it's something else you've been building probably from childhood, the subtle teaching that you're receiving.
That's right. This is a work of the Holy Spirit. I mean, one can't explain it in any other way, really. But anyway, then I asked for instruction, and you see, because I was a boarder and because Pakistan was so far away, I stayed at school also for my holidays. My parents had some friends, so for part of that I would go away, but most of the time I spent in school, even during the holidays. And the priests next door, we were a group of us, so they sometimes would take us out or invite us over for a thing. And so I became friendly. We could talk a little bit more in a more relaxed way. With the nuns too, I could discuss, and then the Catholic girls in my school, so we had discussions and so on. So it just gradually led to that I wanted instruction.
Something else I was wondering is that, and again, I don't know that all the audience appreciates the fact that probably once you're in England, there's a fair number of Pakistani.
Not in the 50s.
There wasn't? Oh, okay.
No, it was, you see, I came to England in 1957. There were not many foreigners living there. I mean, not from the third, from the third world living there. So,
because I was thinking maybe you would encounter some.
They were beginning to come,
there.
But not. No, I came across no Pakistanis, and in fact, most of my school, I think, the 95% of the school, the student body was British, or there were few foreigners. My best friend was from Iraq, Catholic, but there were not many. But anyway, in 1959, then in the beginning of 1959, I was by this time I was 18 years old, so I asked for I should be baptized. But before I did that, I wanted my father to know. So I wrote a letter to my parents to say that I had thought about it, I had studied it, and I was going to convert to Catholicism. I guess I was naive. I did not expect the reaction I got. My father immediately wanted me to be sent back to Pakistan. I had an exam coming up, nothing. I just had to go back. So within a week, the nuns had to arrange for my departure. And then I asked the priest if I could be baptized before I went back to Pakistan. And he said no, because he thought that I was in the care of the sisters and this would be a breach of confidence. So he refused. So then I said to him, all right, if you won't do it, I will ask my friend to baptize me. And as I've learned from you, this is quite valid. And so he said, well, that's very disobedient, but it is valid. But he baptized me, he did. So I was baptized on the feast of Corpus Christi. He wanted me to take a Christian name, and I said, well, I'm going back to Pakistan, and I don't think I should have a Christian name. You should baptize me Talat, and when you do that, I will automatically have a Christian name because it'll be baptized. But we had a little bit of a struggle on that. In the end, I said, all right, baptize me Talat Christina, because it was Corpus Christi, the feast of Corpus Christi. So we compromised there. So I was baptized with my given name too. And I returned, and then on the way to the airport, we stopped by at the bishop's office, and he confirmed me. So I went back to Pakistan strengthened with 2 sacraments. I didn't need confession because I had just been baptized. Right. And then I was confirmed. So I came back, and then when my father asked me on my return whether I was baptized, of course I had to admit that I was. That led to a lot of problems for me, because my father then kind of made sure that I didn't meet Christians, that I didn't go out, and that I was restricted, and I was pretty well guarded at home. And that continued for about a year, and in the meantime I had succeeded in smuggling a little letter to a priest who was the principal of my brother's school, because he also went to Catholic schools. And then when I finally left home, after a year at home, I just walked out. I just walked out. I had nothing with me, the clothes I wore, and I just walked out, and I asked the taxi to take me to the nuns, to this convent that I had been at as a schoolgirl, and I didn't even have the taxi money. I had to ask the sisters to pay them, which they did. And when I was very surprised when I came that they knew about me, because this priest, who was in another town, had told the bishop, and everybody, I think all of Catholic Pakistan knew about me by that time, that there was some hidden Catholic somewhere. My father did turn up with the police to fetch me, but because I was of age, they couldn't, I refused to go. And so I stayed with the nuns for about 6 months. They kept me in the cloister, in fact, for my protection, because they thought maybe somebody would try to kidnap me or something. And then
was there a fear of? There was.
Because
you had converted to Catholicism.
Yes, and it's a Muslim country, and the nuns were in a difficult situation. But still, this was in 1960, 60. So things were they were not as they are now. I think it probably would have been much more difficult today.
Today it's very dangerous.
It is. But it wasn't as dangerous, although of course we didn't go around telling everybody, you know. And I also had tried to say to my father, I will not embarrass you in front of your friends, because I think that my parents were more upset by what people would say than that I had become a Catholic. I think it was what the social pressures would be on them. And I remember my mother said something to me that I've never forgotten. She said to me, I wish you'd come home with a child from England and that you converted. And for a Muslim woman to say that, it just shows you how extremely ashamed they were of me.
Wow. And I thought it was interesting that the the question your father asked is, were you baptized?
Yeah.
I mean, that was the symbol. The
Yes,
baptism.
yes. They understood that. They
understood
Yes,
what baptism means.
Yes,
and that
yes, yes.
It's not just did you accept Christ or did you have a faith, but were you baptized? That was the step. That was the major.
And then another very interesting thing happened to me, because when I became a Catholic, I was given a few presents. Somebody gave me a Bible, somebody gave me a rosary, and I was given a crucifix. All these things I still possess. And my father then said, "Oh, I have to read this Bible." I don't think he'd ever read the Bible, so he picked it up and he went through the pages. And he was so shocked. He said, I think he only read the first few pages of Genesis and said, and all these, this is Bible, all these people are sinners, Abraham did this, So I said, well, because you see, it's a very, in the Quran, all these patriarchs, they have a very, it's been cleaned, their image kind of, they're not, they're not sinners, they're all.
Yeah, I think the word for that is hagiography. You make
That's
them
right.
a whole lot nicer looking than
That's
they really
right.
were.
And he was really shocked by that I should, take on a faith that showed people that they respected as,
That's right. You really are.
And of course, I did not think about that at the time, but since then I've often thought about it, and it's so that was the first part of my conversion story. My parents eventually. I had to leave, of course. I realized I could not stay in Pakistan because I could not live this hidden life where I could not do anything. And
unless you were called to the convent.
That's right. I did consider that too. I think all convert girls do that. They want to become nuns or something. I think even thought about the poor Clares. But I went back to England. I had friends there who, in fact, supported me in England in the beginning, and I was there for 2 years.
Now, one other thing, when you were back in Pakistan, you said at one point you were involved with the sisters that Mother Teresa was involved with at one point. Is that right?
No, not with the Mother Teresa. I went to school with them, but I was not with the Mother Teresa sisters. That I was.
You went to school with those sisters?
Not with the Mother Teresa sisters, but her former convent.
That's right. Okay.
The Loreto nuns.
Now, had she been in India? That was after you were there. Is that right?
She was, in India. I think she came to India in the 1920s, so she was there. And when I think she had her second call. I think it was in 1946, 47, something. I don't remember, 48, somewhere around there. So when I was in the school as a young child, she was still a member of that congregation, although she was in their house in Calcutta. Well, I was in Darjeeling, but she was coming up to Darjeeling for her retreat. Okay. And so that's what I probably knew her as a child, a little one. Yes, it could have. Yeah, we probably did. Who knows?
Wow. In the time you were there, had she become known yet?
No.
That was later.
And I think that came later with Malcolm Muggeridge's TV program about her. I mean, I think the Indians knew about her, the people in Calcutta knew about her, but worldwide she became. I think that was really when it.
Okay. So after 6 months or so, you.
Then I went back to England. Because my family are very, very loving. I must say, and I'm very, very, very grateful to my family for my gift of faith, because that I've never lost. I received it from my parents, and I'm extremely grateful. I've always believed in God, and I thank them for that, and I pray for them for that great gift they gave me.
But do you discuss?
But we don't. Unfortunately, my father was much older than my mother. He was, and so I never had the opportunity to discuss. He died more than 30 years ago now, so I never really, when I was able to discuss, he was not there. With my mother, although she's a very prayerful woman and in her own way very holy, I don't think she has. You can't discuss with her because she just does not like anybody to bring doubts into her. And so, you can't discuss. I've tried. Now she's unfortunately has dementia, so I can't talk to her anymore. But 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would try to discuss when she'd come and visit us here. I tried to talk to her about her faith, about her. But I always found that I think she was a little scared to discuss with me because she didn't want me to
Well, she saw what happened to you.
And I find that very sad, that people are so afraid to discuss their faith. Because either they will get strengthened because of the discussion, and which is a good thing, or they will find the truth, which is also a good thing. And either way, they'll find.
If it's true, then you want it.
That's right, yes. So I find it very sad when people will not discuss. I find it everywhere. People, they're very timid, and but our popes, they tell us, do not be afraid, and I think that's very good.
John Paul.
That's right.
That was his theme. Let's take a break, and we'll come back in just a second with more of Talat's story. Welcome back to this special edition of The Journey Home. Our guest is Talat Storkirk, and thank you, Talat, for sharing the first part of your journey. It's hard to condense a whole life into an hour, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
You, at this point in your journey, are now in England.
Yes.
I guess you could say you've kind of left Pakistan behind.
I have.
Whole culture. I mean, now you're a Catholic living in England, right?
That's right. I went to nursing school there to begin with, but in the meantime, I've always corresponded with my parents. In the beginning, they didn't answer my letters, but my brother had also come to England to study, and I took up a relationship with him because he was younger than I was, and I'd been living in England longer time, so we had no difficulty in reconnecting. And then my mother, she really wanted me to come back, and so we did a deal. I told my parents, I'll come home, but two conditions. One, that I would be allowed to practice my faith, and secondly, that I would be allowed to work. And then I would, on my part, not make a big thing about my Catholicism. I'd be discreet so that their friends, they didn't have to be embarrassed. Yeah.
A woman working, is that normal in Pakistan?
Oh, yes, it is.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was normal in your culture.
Yes,
okay.
yes. So my parents, they said, okay, come home. So I went home. I wanted to go home. My parents are they were very loving. My mother was also very loving, and the whole family, it's a very, very warm, wonderful people. So I really felt very welcome back home. And this was a wonderful opportunity for me because I was working as a journalist, and in fact I was an editor for a magazine, an English language magazine. And this gave me an opportunity to meet foreigners, to meet other people. I could move around. And for my parents, it was a wonderful job too, because they didn't have to, because I was moving around, they could say, oh, she's doing it for her work. Otherwise it was a little bit strange for an unmarried girl to be kind of gallivanting around town with a photographer, but I could do that, and it was all right. And my experience working I worked for a publishing and a newspaper, Pakistan's largest newspaper, Dawn, and their magazine. It was a magazine that they had. And I must say, I was treated very nicely by my male colleagues. I was the only girl in this particular office, and I was very well treated, really like a queen. So this idea about Muslim men not knowing how to treat women is not true. No, it really isn't.
Did they know you were Catholic?
They did.
Okay.
They did. Or some of them did, maybe not all of them, because I was very discreet. And at that time, I wouldn't wear a cross because I wasn't quite sure of the reception I'd get. So I was, perhaps, I'm ashamed to say, too discreet. However, this gave me an opportunity to meet with other people, and this is how I met my husband, it was his first posting. He worked for the Swedish Foreign Office, and he was working at the Swedish Embassy in Karachi, and I met him there.
Now, when you came back, did your father try to challenge your
No,
decision?
they didn't.
Okay.
It was just, we never talked about it.
Ah.
I could take a taxi or a rickshaw to Mass every Sunday, and nobody asked me any questions. That my parents knew I was going there. And in fact, my first date with my husband was he came to pick me up and take me to church. I met him on a party on Saturday, and he found out I was a Catholic, interested him because he was a Lutheran. And he said,
And he
"Oh,
was a Swede.
he was a Swede." And he said, "Okay, I'll take you to Mass," because he was curious about a Catholic Mass. So that was our first date. It was a Mass at at the cathedral.
Little did he know, right?
Right, little did he know. And then we were very, we decided very quickly that we were going to marry, I think after just 6 months. But my husband in the meantime had been transferred to Holland. And when I told my parents that I wanted to marry a Swede, oh, hell broke loose again. Because I think my parents had always hoped that I would marry a Muslim and then I would reconvert, come back, yeah. And when that did not happen, they realized that it would not happen, so they were very, very sad. So I had a second rupture with my parents. I again had to leave home. My parents tried to, really almost blackmail my husband from backing off, and which I was very upset over, because I thought that they shouldn't have done that. And with that, then I left again, and I came back to Europe. And eventually, my husband and I, we married in 1965, and then for the next 4 years, I had no contact with my parents, because they were very upset with me. And but I continued with my brother, and through some of my friends, I was able to keep in touch with them, although kind of not directly. And then an uncle of mine died, my mother's brother, and I went to London for his, when he was in hospital there, and that bridged. Because I always felt great affection for my family, and I know that they felt it for me too, although they were a little bit angry with me for what I had done.
Probably awkward, not knowing what to do in what they saw as rebellion, but also a different world. I mean, the Muslim world, and to try to understand the Catholic world.
No, it was very hard for them to understand that. And of course, they perhaps thought that I was rejecting them in some way. That is why it was so important for me to keep my name, because I thought that otherwise they'd think that I had, not only I'd rejected my name, I'd rejected my culture, I'd rejected it. And I've really never done that, at least not in my heart. I've always been very proud to be a Pakistani, and I'm very grateful to them for my faith. So it has never been a rejection from my part. But I can see that they might have thought that. But anyway, then with my husband, we got married. Of course, we dare not tell anybody that we were getting married. We had nobody at our wedding, 2 witnesses from my husband's office, and that was it. We married in Holland. And there you have to have these civil wedding first and then a religious wedding. So we had that in Holland. And
was it a Catholic or a Lutheran wedding?
No, it was a Catholic wedding. Okay. Oh, in those days, they still had to sign, that their children would be brought up Catholic and so on. I don't think they do it anymore, but this is this is not pre-Vatican, but still I don't think they had changed those rules then.
Well, they pretty much still accept it, but was your husband at the time showing any interest?
You see, for me, the most important thing about marrying my husband was I would never have married a Muslim. That I would not have done. And I would not have married somebody who did not support me in my values and in my faith. That was the most, he didn't have to be a Catholic, but he had to not to be against it. Yeah. Because I don't think I would have been interested in somebody who was
set against it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it had to be, and that has been my principle even with my daughters. I've always advised them when they were dating that please don't marry somebody who doesn't share your values, and I'm very happy that they both married very good men. So my husband, he was very attracted to Catholicism. He was he always came to church with me, and he was a great support the first 16 years of our marriage. When he was not a Catholic, but he came. In fact, in the end, our daughters were telling him, "Why don't you become a Catholic? You're more Catholic than Mama." So when we were stationed in Tokyo, he finally became a Catholic. He was received into the church there in 1980.
I'm sorry, I forgot. What did your husband do?
He was working for the Swedish Foreign Office.
Okay.
So we lived in Algeria, in Holland, in Italy, in Poland, and we finally
Fascinating.
ended.
So
yes.
you've lived in lots of places.
Lots of places, yes. And then we were in Tokyo for 5.5 years. And there we belonged to a parish that was run by the American Franciscans from the Holy Name province, New York. And they had this chapel center in Tokyo, in Roppongi, very close to where we lived. And that became our second home. And our daughters, I'm very happy to say, their real first experience of being in a Catholic milieu was at that chapel center, which was very warm, very welcoming, and we had a great time. And they have never ever not wanted to be Catholic either, you know. So it's been a very good, for us it was a wonderful place. I'm very grateful to the Americans for their warm Catholicism, and the people that I met there at that chapel center. They were mostly Americans who came there, but at the time when we were there. Most
of your journey has been about your discovering of the faith. So in many ways it's what you've been receiving, and after becoming Catholic, coming home, did you yourself get involved?
Oh yes, I became involved already when we were living in Tokyo. I started to go to retreats and all kinds of courses and so on to deepen my faith, because I really wanted to do that, and because everything was in English. Before we lived in non-English speaking countries, so there was a handicap there to get into the parish life of these places that we lived in. It was difficult in Poland, it was difficult in Italy and Algeria and so on. So, but when we came to this English speaking community, it really blossomed for me. And when we returned to Sweden, I got immediately, I had already started to teach catechism for the lower grades in Tokyo, but when we came back here, I got involved in the parish here. I go to Santa Eugenia's parish here, which is a Jesuit-run parish, and after a while, somebody asked me to take over to be responsible for the English-speaking group there, and so we started a catechism there for the English-speaking group, and I'm very involved there, and I teach catechism to children who are between 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. It's kind of a mixed group. And because I'm not preparing them for a sacrament, this is a post-first Holy Communion, I'm trying to teach them to pray. So we do a lot of sharing and praying together. And also I try to get them to think about their faith. You know, I ask them questions and I invite them to, so that we don't follow any course material anymore, with just discussion and trying to get them to take up abortion,
take their faith seriously.
All kinds of things like that. So that they start, because I think that there's been a problem with catechesis I saw it in my daughters. They unfortunately did not receive very good catechesis.
Well, they were living in these different countries.
Yes. But you know, it was the materials. Now when I look back at those books that they received, my gosh, it was really awful much stuff. I don't know how anybody stayed Catholic with that. And I think maybe you can see the result in many countries, that people my age and my children's age are not very well catechized. But thank God that's changing. I see new books coming out that are much better. Right. But there is a lost generation there.
Well, you know, I think not because of what was in the council, but because of how people misinterpreted, misapplied, ran with the council during a time of people not sure which direction.
No, it's not the council's fault. Absolutely not. No, but it's the way it was interpreted. Absolutely. And you know, when I look at the First Communion material, it's just absolutely appalling. It really is. So we've had to change all that gradually. Of course, we don't have the resources here either, because you know everything has. But because I teach in the English group, we are very lucky. We can get a lot of stuff from the United States, from England, and also from the internet. It's just fantastic what is available now. I'm absolutely very happy to live nowadays.
So you said your husband came in when you were in Tokyo?
Yes, yes. After we were married 16 years, he became a Catholic, and so now we are a totally Catholic family, and our 2 daughters. One of them, she's married a Catholic, and the other one she's married to a Lutheran. But he totally supports her in her faith. And
what are your thoughts on this in your lifetime? There's been a lot of changes in the relationship between the Islamic world and the West, and we really see it now. And for in many ways, those of us that have no direct contact with the Islamic world, we're seeing it only through the news and what we're seeing. But you've lived it, obviously.
Yeah. No, I it's like with any faith, there are good and bad people. There are extremists and moderates, and on all sides. But what I do think that I was very happy with Pope Benedict, that he said that we have to have a reciprocity. I think that is absolutely important. I think I can't understand why anybody should take offense over that there should be freedom of expression, freedom of religion. I mean, for me, it's absolutely vital. I mean, I can't see how I could live in Pakistan if it wasn't. I do not understand the commotion that was caused because the Pope baptized a Muslim at the Easter liturgy. I mean, it was his choice. He's a 56-year-old man, I think he was. I mean, how can you force people to go against their conscience? I mean...
Yeah, I've often wondered, and I may be completely wrong on this, but I've often wondered when you have a whole country or area that refuses freedom to others, it almost makes me wonder whether it's because down deep they're insecure about their own.
I think that is the reason. Absolutely.
They're afraid they're gonna that what they believe is going to be torn down.
And then there's certain firebrands who ignite the others to do that. But most people, like everywhere, I mean, they're not very well informed about their faith. I'm sad to say that we Catholics are the same. Many of us don't really bother to deepen our knowledge and our faith either. So I mean, I'm not pointing fingers at the Muslims, but it is like that. But unfortunately, there are ruthless people who incite others.
And some of those very radicals they're taking their faith very seriously.
I wonder if they are.
Well, that's a good point. Are they, or they're taking it? Either they're taking it so seriously but not guided well, so they're off base. I mean, I know fundamentalist Christians that unguided can become very radical.
Right.
Or they're using their faith for their own
That's right.
benefit.
I think very often it's that, because one has to have a humility about it and at least give the other person the benefit of the doubt. How can anybody go into anybody's heart and say that you should be this or that? I mean, in the end, we all have to make the decision. And then, I mean, I used to tell my father, I said, okay, maybe heaven, I'll find out that it's Muslim. But okay, I did it out of sincerity, and God can hardly, if He's a merciful God, as Islam says He is, how can He punish me for that? If you're sincere. And I said it might be the other way around too. You might find that He's a Catholic God after all.
That's the way we have ecumenical dialogue.
Right. You can't. We have to be open, and we have to be tolerant, and we have to at least respect each other's.
But of course, the reason we're having a program like this is because we really do want everyone to come home to the fullness. I mean, that is our absolute desire.
For me, there is nothing else.
We believe that the church is the church because it's the church that Christ established, and so we're following that in the fullness of that.
Yes.
And I look back, one of your thoughts on, you were brought up in these wonderful schools by the nuns, and you'd mentioned a little bit earlier that sadly after Vatican II, where some of those monastic movements are not providing those services anymore.
No, I'm very sad that these their charism was to teach. But some of them don't do that anymore, or I think maybe that's why they don't get the perhaps, I don't know, the vocations either, because people like me have only good things to say. I pray for them to my dying day, because I think they have done a fantastic job, and I don't think even Catholics are aware of what missionaries have done in mission countries. Well, I think maybe they learn now, because now the stream has been reversed. Now there are mission people from my country and are coming back to Europe, which was really the source of missionary activity for so many centuries, and now sadly it's no more the case. And now we have only in our own diocese we have priests from all over the world.
That's right. Well, in America, I mean, I've encountered many Indian priests in America that they're serving there.
So we're paying back now for what we received.
But I think your story, your own conversion, is a witness to the seeds planted by those wonderful nuns that maybe in their environment they couldn't catechize, but they delivered the faith through their love and their mercy.
Imagine a sister from England, coming from a temperate climate, coming to our part of the world, the heat, the dirt, the flies, the smells, the whatever, you name it. And then to make it their home for the rest of their lives. Gosh, I wonder how many would do that. Really. It just, and for what? For nothing but for the love of God. I mean, that is just such a
similar,
tremendous
of course,
thing.
You mentioned from England, but then that's also the parallel to Mother Teresa's same change.
That's right, yeah, or I'm just taking them as an example.
But I was also thinking that, again, Americans particularly, who are also watching this show, we live in a country where we have really no concept of the caste struggles that are in India. So you have the wonderful nuns and brothers coming to serve in a system, and they're treating everyone with love.
Absolutely the same. I went back to Pakistan last year with two of my grandchildren, two boys. They were then 13 and 9 years old. And of course they were very shocked by Pakistan. They loved the people because they're wonderful, very kind, very warm, and they had a great reception from everybody, almost wherever they went. But the poverty, the dirt, the flies, this absolutely shocked them. Really, they did. And then I took them to, I know a Belgian nun who lives in the poorest section of town, and she's built a school there for 1,000 children. They had 2 shifts. And in this absolute slum of a place, you go into the walls behind, and it's like a little oasis. Clean garden. It's so shocking that you can't believe it. My grandchildren, it was a fantastic experience for them to see that, and to see what this lone Western woman there has been doing and has done there. It was mind-boggling for the boys.
It's an encouragement to us to pray for those sisters and those orders that are probably struggling.
And they're struggling there. And there's nothing, and they get of course they have a few Catholics, very poor Catholics, and in fact they're moving in around that school because the education is so good there. And these nuns, these missionaries, they are really absolutely...
You'd mentioned also something to me where, again, outside of Indian culture we may not understand, and that is, for example, when you have those of the lower caste who are treated and cared for by the sisters, then they themselves become sisters.
Yes. I discussed that with my former school. I went there and I was asking them how it was. The St. Joseph's School in Karachi was the elite school when I was growing up. Everybody wanted to send their children there. It is no longer that. And I asked them why, and they said, well, there are no more European sisters coming. There are few of them, they're very old there. And then, of course, I don't think Pakistan allows missionaries to come in anymore. I'm not quite sure on that. But anyway, but these young girls that they have trained and educated now, they're taking over these teachers and principals of the school. But unfortunately, they belong to the lower caste, absolutely the the lowest caste.
Yeah.
And many of the ladies, you know, from these fine families, they find it very difficult to accept that these girls, although they're educated and probably have all the degrees you can think of, but because they've come from the wrong caste or the wrong class, I don't know what it is.
In America, we say the wrong side of the tracks.
That's right, that's right. Which is very, very sad, and,
Yes.
and it is because they don't. That is one of the problems there, and. But I think, you know, although in Muslim Pakistan we don't have a caste system there, but because of the culture,
Yeah.
you know, it is very much in.
Well, it helps us know how to pray for those people
Yes.
in those cultures and the
Yes.
struggles they have,
Yes,
and
yeah.
especially now in our world today when the issue of Islam and Christianity are confronting themselves in a way that maybe it's been almost 700-800 years since we've confronted the way that we're confronting today. Helps us understand how we need to reach out in love and prayer and mercy, and recognize God's great love for everyone. We want them to know the fullness of the faith, but we do that in love. I mean,
Yes,
that's what we were
yes,
called
yes.
to evangelize. Talat, thank you so much
Thank you so much.
for joining us on the journey home, sharing your story with us, and our prayers are for you and your family.
Thank you.
Continued ministry. And thank you all for joining us on this special edition of the Journey Home from Stockholm, Sweden. God bless you. See you again soon.